My GF rejected my proposal in front of 40 guests and laughed. You seriously thought I'd marry you? I took the ring back and walked out. 4 months later, she showed up crying after discovering who I was engaged to. I should probably start by saying that I didn't randomly decide to propose to my girlfriend because we'd been dating for a while and I figured, why not? Marissa and I had been together for 3 years. We had talked about marriage a lot. That's important because of what happened later. She'd shown me rings she liked. We'd talked about whether we wanted kids. We'd discussed buying a house eventually. She once spent an entire car ride explaining why she hated proposals at sporting events because she thought they were embarrassing. So yeah, I thought marriage was where we were headed. Maybe I was stupid. Looking back, there were definitely things I ignored. Marissa had changed jobs twice while we were together. Neither transition went particularly smoothly, so I picked up more of our expenses. The apartment was mine, and I paid most of the household costs anyway. Vacations were usually mostly on me too. About 8 months before her birthday, I paid off the remaining balance on her student loan. It was a little over $11,000. She didn't ask me to do it. I offered. I remember her sitting beside me afterward saying, "When we're married, none of this yours and mine stuff is going to matter anyway." That sentence stuck with me. Apparently not enough. Her 30th birthday was coming up, and she wanted a big dinner. Her parents were coming. Her sister, cousins, co-workers, old college friends. There were around 40 people total. I'd already bought the ring by then. It cost $18,000, which sounds insane when I type it out now. I could afford it, though, and it was extremely close to one she had shown me months earlier. My plan was pretty simple. Dinner, cake, proposal. I wasn't expecting some movie scene where everybody started crying and strangers applauded. I just thought she'd be happy. Dinner went completely normally. Marissa was in a great mood. She was drinking wine with 2 of her friends and opening presents. At one point she leaned over, kissed me and said the night was perfect. So when everyone had finished eating, I stood up. I said a few things about the last 3 years. Nothing ridiculous. Maybe 30 seconds. Then I got down on one knee. Marissa stared at me. I remember smiling because I thought she was shocked. Then she looked at the ring and laughed. Not nervous laughter either. She actually laughed and looked toward one of her friends. You seriously thought I'd marry you? For about 2 seconds, I genuinely thought this was some weird joke. I looked at her and said, "What?" She shook her head. "Callum, come on." I stood up slowly. I don't remember exactly what somebody at the other end of the table said. There were people whispering by then. Her mother looked like she wanted to crawl under the table. Marissa kept going. "I'm not ready to settle for this." I thought you understood that. That was the part that got me. Not ready to settle for this. Not I'm not ready to get married. Not can we talk privately? For this. Me. Then someone snickered. I never figured out who it was. Honestly, I didn't care enough to ask later. I just looked at Marissa. 3 years. All those conversations. The ring pictures. The house conversations. Her telling me that when we were married, our money would basically be shared anyway. And now she was looking at me like I'd misunderstood some casual relationship. I noticed she still had her hand extended. I'd already slipped the ring onto her finger before she started laughing. So I reached over and took it back. That finally changed her expression. "Seriously?" she said. I put the ring into the box. "Understood." She rolled her eyes. "Oh my God, Callum. Don't do this." I didn't answer. I picked up my phone and keys and walked toward the exit. She called my name once. I kept walking. The weird thing is, I wasn't even angry yet. I think I was embarrassed more than anything. My face felt hot, and I just wanted to get away from everyone before somebody tried giving me a pity speech. I was halfway across the parking lot when I heard someone behind me. "Callum." I turned around. It was Bethany Cross. Bethany and I had known each other for years. She'd been my business partner once, although that's a whole separate story. She was holding my coat. Apparently I'd left it over the back of my chair. "You forgot this." "Thanks." She handed it to me and looked back toward the restaurant. For a second, neither of us said anything. Then she said, "You didn't deserve that." I shrugged because I honestly didn't know what else to do. Bethany didn't hug me. She didn't start insulting Marissa. She didn't give me some speech about how everything happens for a reason. Thank God. She just said, "Do you want me to drive you?" "No, I'm good." "You sure?" "Yeah." She nodded. "Okay. Text me when you get home." I got into my car. My phone was already buzzing before I left the parking lot. Marissa, then her sister, then Marissa again. I turned the phone face down and drove home. The apartment was completely quiet when I walked in. Marissa's shoes were beside the door. Her jacket was hanging next to mine. There were packages for her business stacked near the hallway. Normal stuff. Except none of it felt normal anymore. I sat at the kitchen table and put the ring box in front of me. Then I opened my banking app. I'm not even sure why. I started scrolling through our expenses. Rent, utilities, insurance, subscriptions, car payment. Then I looked toward the hallway where several boxes of Marissa's inventory were sitting. That was when something finally clicked. Marissa had made one thing very clear tonight. She didn't want to build a life with me. Fine. But as I sat there looking through those payments, I realized just how much of her life I was still paying for. And for the first time that night, I knew exactly what I was going to do Monday morning. I barely slept that night. Not because I was lying there crying or staring at old pictures or anything like that. My brain just wouldn't shut off. Every 20 minutes, I'd remember another expense. Her phone, the streaming services, the car, some monthly membership she'd signed up for and forgotten about. Then there was her business. I eventually grabbed a notepad and started writing everything down because otherwise I was going to keep doing mental math until sunrise. Marissa didn't come home that night. Around 1:30, she texted me, "Are you seriously going to act like this?" I read it and put my phone back down. 5 minutes later, "You ruined my birthday BTW." That one actually made me laugh. Not because anything was funny, it was just such an absurd thing to read after what had happened. Apparently her birthday was the real victim here. I didn't respond. Saturday morning, I started separating everything properly. And I want to be clear about this because Marissa would later tell people a very different version. I didn't empty any joint accounts. I didn't touch her money. I didn't cancel anything she had paid for herself. I went through every recurring expense connected to my cards or accounts and figured out what was actually mine. The apartment was easy. I bought it before we started dating. Marissa had never been on the deed. She contributed occasionally toward groceries and smaller expenses, but there wasn't some 50-50 arrangement where I suddenly decided to kick her out after she rejected me. The car was slightly more complicated. She drove it every day, but the lease ran through my business because I'd originally gotten it when she was between jobs. Again, at the time, I thought we were building a life together. That phrase was starting to annoy me. Then I got to her online store. Marissa sold women's clothing and accessories. Nothing huge, but she had built a decent customer base. The problem was fulfillment. Storage and shipping had been eating into her margins when she first started, so I'd arranged for her inventory to go through my company at essentially cost. She'd saved a ridiculous amount of money because of it. I stared at those numbers for a while. Then I emailed the person who handled our accounts. I kept it simple. Starting Monday, Marissa's company would no longer receive the internal discounted rate. She could continue using the service if she wanted. She would just pay the same commercial rate as everyone else. No revenge, no missing inventory, no canceled orders, just normal pricing. Sunday afternoon, Marissa finally came back. I was in the kitchen when she walked in wearing the same clothes from Friday night. She dropped her purse on the counter. "So are you done?" I looked at her. "Done with what?" "This." She waved her hand between us. I genuinely didn't understand. "You rejected my proposal." "I know that. In front of 40 people. You put me on the spot." I stared at her for a second. "You've been talking about marriage for 2 years. That doesn't mean I wanted you proposing at my birthday. You said you wanted your family there." I said that hypothetically. "Okay." Apparently I had missed the footnote. She crossed her arms. "You could have asked me privately first. Asked if I could ask you? You know what I mean." "Actually, I didn't, but arguing about it seemed pointless." "I understand your answer," I said. "You don't want to marry me." She sighed. "Why are you making everything so black and white?" "Because yes or no usually is." That irritated her. She started saying I was being childish and that mature couples could survive an embarrassing moment without blowing up their entire relationship. That was interesting wording. An embarrassing moment. Like she'd spilled wine on me. I told her I wasn't discussing it anymore. Then I handed her an envelope. She looked at it. "What's this?" "Notice regarding the apartment." Her face changed. "You're kicking me out?" "I'm ending the relationship. You'll have the legally required time to move your things." She actually laughed again. Not the same laugh as Friday. This one sounded nervous. "Callum, stop. I'm serious. You're throwing away 3 years because I said no?" "No. I'm accepting your answer." She tossed the envelope onto the counter. "You're being dramatic." "Okay." That seemed to bother her more than if I'd yelled. She followed me into the living room. "So what? I'm supposed to find an apartment now?" "Yes." "And the car?" "We'll sort that out according to the lease." Her eyes narrowed. "What else have you done?" "Nothing to you." That distinction mattered to me. I hadn't done anything to Marissa. I was just separating myself from her. Monday morning, I returned the ring. The jeweler inspected it, checked the paperwork and processed the return. Walking out without that little box felt strange. 3 days earlier, I'd been worried about whether Marissa would cry when she saw it. Now I was mostly relieved to have my $18,000 back. By lunchtime, I had removed every personal recurring payment of hers from my accounts. I also confirmed that her business would move to standard commercial pricing starting with the next billing cycle. Then my phone buzzed. "Marissa, stop being dramatic." A minute later, "You embarrassed yourself, not me." I didn't respond. For the next few days, things were surprisingly quiet. Marissa stayed mostly with friends. She came by twice for clothes. Both times she acted like I was throwing some extended tantrum that would eventually burn itself out. Then Thursday afternoon, my phone rang. I almost ignored it. "Marissa," I answered. "Hello? What did you do?" Her voice was completely different. "What are you talking about?" "My payment got declined." "Which payment?" She told me. I pulled up my account while she was talking. Then I realized what had happened. It was one of her bills I'd been paying automatically for almost 2 years. I stopped paying it. There was a pause. Then she said something that told me she still hadn't understood the situation at all. "What do you mean you stopped paying it? You can't just do that." "What do you mean I can't?" "You know exactly what I mean. Marissa said. That bill has always come out of your account, right? So why would you cancel it without telling me? I had to pull the phone away from my ear for a second. Not because she was yelling. I was just trying to understand the logic. It's your bill, Marissa. That's not the point. That feels pretty relevant. She went quiet. Then she started talking about how I was deliberately trying to make her life difficult because she'd rejected me. I told her I hadn't charged her anything. I hadn't taken money from her account. I hadn't canceled a service in her name. I'd stopped paying for it. Apparently that distinction was offensive. You're punishing me. No, I'm not supporting you anymore. After 3 years, you ended the relationship. I never said that. That caught me off guard. I leaned back in my chair. What exactly did you think was going to happen after Friday? I thought we'd talk. You laughed in my face. Oh my God, are you going to keep saying that? Probably, considering it happened less than a week ago. Instead I said, pay your bill, Marissa. Then I hung up. She called back immediately. I let it ring. That was basically how the next week went. Every couple of days, she discovered another expense she hadn't realized I was covering. The first few calls were angry. Then she started trying a different approach. One night she texted, "Can we please act like adults and discuss this?" I almost replied that adults generally pay their own bills, but I decided against it. There wasn't anything left to discuss. Then her business became the problem. I was at work when she called. Why did my fulfillment invoice triple? It didn't triple. It absolutely did. You're looking at the standard commercial rate. What standard commercial rate? The rate every other client pays. There was a long pause. Why am I paying that? Because you're a client. I've never paid that. I know. Her old arrangement had basically covered our actual costs. Storage, packing, shipping coordination. We weren't making meaningful money from her account. It made sense when I thought I was helping my future wife build something. It made considerably less sense now. You can't change my pricing because we broke up, she said. We can change your pricing because your previous rate was an internal discount. That's retaliation. No. Retaliation would be refusing to handle your inventory. I explained that her business was still being treated exactly like any other customer. Nothing had disappeared. Nothing had been delayed. Her orders were still going out. She just had to pay the normal rate. She started crying. Not loudly, just enough that I could hear her breathing change. A month earlier, that probably would have made me immediately start trying to fix things. This time I waited. My margins don't work at that rate, she finally said. I'm sorry to hear that. You know they don't. I did. That was why I'd given her the discount in the first place. What am I supposed to do? You can find another provider. Do you hear yourself? Yes. She hung up on me. I figured that would be the end of it for a while. It wasn't. Marissa was also apartment hunting. I only knew because she texted asking if I would be willing to act as a guarantor. I genuinely thought I had misunderstood the message. You want me to guarantee your new lease? Her response came almost immediately. Just temporarily. My income looks weird because of the business. I stared at my phone. Then I typed, no. 3 dots appeared. Disappeared. Appeared again. Wow. That was all she sent. Apparently WoW was supposed to make me reconsider becoming financially responsible for my ex-girlfriend's apartment. Yeah, good luck with that. A couple of days later, one of our mutual friends, Owen, called me. He wasn't at the birthday dinner, so he'd only heard pieces of what happened. Marissa's staying with Tessa, right? I think so. Not anymore. Apparently Tessa had agreed to let Marissa stay for a few nights. A few nights had turned into nearly 2 weeks. Then Marissa started receiving business inventory there. Tessa finally told her she needed another arrangement. Marissa tried another friend. Same basic answer. That surprised me. Some of these were the same people who had spent years telling Marissa how lucky she was and how they'd always have her back. Turns out always apparently meant until you needed a spare bedroom. Meanwhile, Marissa's messages started changing. The anger slowly disappeared. One night she sent me a paragraph explaining that she had been overwhelmed during the proposal. Then another, I didn't mean to humiliate you. That was technically the first apology I'd received. Unfortunately, the next sentence was, but you also need to understand how much pressure you put me under. There it was. I didn't respond. The following morning, we had 3 good years. Are you seriously going to throw that away over one bad night? I read it while drinking coffee. For the first time, I noticed something about all her apologies. Not one of them said, I was wrong. They were explanations, excuses, attempts to negotiate, and almost every serious conversation somehow returned to the apartment, her bills, the car or her business. That was when I started wondering whether Bethany had been right about something she'd told me a long time ago. I hadn't wanted to hear it then. I definitely wasn't ready to think about it now. So I ignored Marissa's messages and went on with my day. That evening, another one came through. This one was much shorter. Maybe we should meet and talk about getting back together. I stared at it for a while. Then my phone buzzed again. But it wasn't Marissa. It was Bethany. You busy tonight? I could use someone to have dinner with. I looked at Marissa's message. Then Bethany's. And for the first time since that birthday dinner, the decision in front of me was actually easy. I replied to Bethany first. Not busy. Where? She sent me the name of a little Italian place about 15 minutes from my apartment. Then I went back to Marissa's message. Maybe we should meet and talk about getting back together. I thought about answering. Instead, I locked my phone and went to get changed. Bethany was already there when I arrived. She was sitting in a booth near the back with a glass of water and the menu folded in front of her. "You actually came," she said. "You invited me." "Yeah, but you've been avoiding civilization." "Fair." She smiled. That was one thing I'd always liked about Bethany. Conversations with her didn't require much maintenance. We'd known each other for about 7 years. We originally met through work and eventually started a business together. I'm not going to bore everyone with the details, but we worked well as partners. Bethany was better with people. I was better with numbers and operations. She could walk into a meeting knowing nobody and leave knowing everyone's kids' names. I could walk into the same meeting and leave knowing exactly how much money everyone was wasting. It worked. A few years later, her father got sick. Not suddenly. It was one of those situations that gradually consumed more and more of her time. Eventually Bethany told me she wanted out. She sold me her share at a fair valuation. And that was that. There was no argument. No secret resentment. We stayed friends. Marissa never particularly liked that. She never directly told me to stop talking to Bethany, but there were comments. "Why does she text you? Why does she still care what happens with the company? Don't you think it's weird you're still friends?" I'd always brushed it off. Anyway, dinner was surprisingly normal. Bethany asked how I was doing. I said, "Fine." She gave me a look. "What? You've always been terrible at lying." "I'm functioning. That I believe." She didn't ask about Marissa again. Instead, we talked about her father, who was doing much better. We talked about work. She told me about a neighbor who apparently believed garbage collection times were a matter of constitutional law. Stupid normal stuff. And honestly, I needed it. Halfway through dinner, I realized I hadn't checked my phone once. When I finally did, I had 3 messages from Marissa. The last one said, "I guess ignoring me is your answer." Bethany noticed my expression. "Problem?" "No." I put my phone face down. "Actually, no problem." She nodded and kept eating. That became our routine without either of us planning it. Coffee one weekend, dinner the next week. Sometimes she'd stop by my office if she was nearby. I started looking forward to seeing her. That made me uncomfortable at first. Not because Bethany had done anything wrong. It had barely been a month. I kept thinking, what kind of person gets out of a 3-year relationship and immediately starts enjoying somebody else's company? So one night I said it. "I don't want this to become weird." Bethany looked across the table. "What is this?" "I don't know." "Then why are you worried about it?" "Good question. I just got out of a relationship." "I'm aware, and I don't want you thinking." "Callum, what?" "I asked you to dinner because you looked miserable." I laughed. "Thanks, you did." She took a sip of her drink. "I'm not asking you for anything." That shut me up. The weird part was, once she said that, things became easier. There was no pressure. We just kept seeing each other. Eventually, though, it stopped feeling entirely platonic. Nothing dramatic happened. No huge confession. One evening she was leaving my apartment after we'd ordered food, and we stood at the door talking for another 20 minutes for absolutely no reason. When she finally left, I closed the door and just stood there. "Okay," I said to myself. Apparently I had a problem. A few days later, Bethany brought up something I hadn't thought about in years. We were having coffee when she said, "Can I tell you something without you getting defensive?" That sounds promising. "Do you remember that conversation we had about Marissa?" I did. Immediately. About 2 years earlier, Bethany had said something about my relationship that really irritated me. I defended Marissa. Actually, I'd done more than that. I'd told Bethany she didn't understand our relationship and needed to stay out of it. We barely spoke for a couple of months afterward. "I remember," I said. Bethany nodded. "I'm not going to say I told you so. Appreciate it, but I want you to think about what I said." I looked at her. "Why?" "Because I think you're starting to understand it now." I didn't answer. I knew exactly what she meant. I just wasn't ready to admit it. Things between Bethany and me continued anyway. A couple of weeks later, we went to dinner at a place across town. Nothing fancy. We were halfway through eating when Bethany suddenly looked past me. "What?" She hesitated. "I think someone you know just saw us." I turned around. Near the entrance was Marissa's friend Kayla. She was staring directly at our table. Our eyes met. Kayla immediately looked down at her phone. I turned back toward Bethany. "Well," she said. "Yeah." My phone was sitting beside my plate. It didn't ring immediately. It took about 20 minutes. Then the screen lit up. "Marissa," and judging by the first line of the message, Kayla hadn't wasted any time. The message said, "So you were cheating on me with Bethany." I read it twice. Then I showed Bethany. She closed her eyes for a second. "Of course." Apparently we were having an affair. "Should we tell ourselves, or do you think we already know?" I laughed. Probably harder than the joke deserved. Marissa sent another message before I could put my phone down. "This explains everything." I typed, "Nothing happened between Bethany and me while we were together." Her response came almost immediately. "Sure. Then, you expect me to believe you moved on this fast?" I stared at that one. There was something strange about being accused of moving on too quickly by the person who had publicly rejected my proposal. I started typing a longer response, deleted it, then wrote, "Believe whatever you want." Bethany looked at me. "That's all you're sending? What else is there?" She nodded. "Good." Marissa apparently didn't agree. For the next 2 days, she sent increasingly angry messages. According to her, Bethany had been waiting in the background for years. She claimed our friendship had always made her uncomfortable. Then she started rewriting old events. Every coffee Bethany and I had ever had became suspicious. Every business conversation became evidence. Even Bethany bringing me my coat after the proposal somehow became proof they'd both known something was happening. I stopped responding. Then Owen sent me a screenshot. Have you seen this? Marissa had made a long public post. She didn't use my full name, but enough mutual friends knew exactly who she meant. According to her version, she had simply asked for more time before marriage. In response, her boyfriend of 3 years had thrown her out, cut her off financially, damaged her business and immediately started dating the woman she had always suspected. That was impressive. Technically, almost every event she mentioned had happened. She had just removed every piece of context that explained why. I read the comments. That was a mistake. People I didn't know were calling me controlling. A couple of Marissa's friends were agreeing with her. Kayla wrote something about how financial control is still control. I almost responded. Instead, I closed the app. About an hour later, Owen called. You're seriously not going to say anything? What do you want me to say? The truth? The people who matter already know. Not all of them. He had a point. Apparently several people who weren't at the birthday dinner believed Marissa's version. Still, I wasn't interested in turning my breakup into some online trial. Then something happened I hadn't expected. People from the dinner started commenting. Her cousin was first. She wrote that Marissa hadn't asked for more time. She had laughed. Then one of her coworkers confirmed the settle for this comment. Someone else mentioned that I'd barely said anything before leaving. Even Marissa's aunt commented that the post was leaving out quite a bit. The whole thing started turning against her without me doing anything. Marissa deleted the post that night. The next morning, she texted me, "Hope you're happy." I didn't answer. A few minutes later, "You had everyone gang up on me." That one I answered. I didn't ask anyone to comment. She never replied. After that, things got quieter. Bethany and I kept seeing each other. And at some point, without either of us officially announcing it, we became a couple. It felt fast when I looked at the calendar. It didn't feel fast when I was actually with her. Bethany wasn't someone I'd met 3 weeks earlier. I'd known her for years. I knew what she was like when she was stressed. I knew how she handled money. I knew how she treated waiters, employees, her father, strangers. More importantly, I didn't feel like I was constantly trying to prove I deserved to be there. About 3 months after the birthday dinner, I asked Bethany something while we were sitting in my kitchen. Do you think this is crazy? She knew exactly what I meant. Probably. I laughed. That's reassuring. She reached across the table. Fast and wrong aren't the same thing. That stayed with me. A couple of weeks later, I went ring shopping again. Different store, different ring, different everything. I didn't tell anyone except Owen. He stared at me when I told him. Already? I know. You sure? Yes. That was really all there was to it. I proposed to Bethany privately. No restaurant. No audience. No 40 people staring at us. Just the two of us. She looked at the ring, then at me. Are you sure? Completely. She started laughing. For about half a second, my stomach dropped. Then she said, yes, idiot. That was probably the happiest I've been in months. We agreed not to make some huge announcement immediately. Neither of us wanted drama. Apparently that was optimistic. 3 weeks later, Owen called me while I was driving home. Hey, what's up? There was a pause. Marissa knows. I tightened my grip on the steering wheel. About Bethany? No. Another pause. The engagement. I sighed. How? No idea. But she called Kayla. Kayla called somebody else. And now apparently everyone knows. I glanced at the clock. Okay, that's it? What am I supposed to do? Owen laughed. Fair enough. I got home about 20 minutes later. Bethany wasn't there that night, so I made dinner, put my phone on silent and tried not to think about it. Nothing happened. Not that night. Not the next morning. By the second day, I figured Marissa had finally decided to leave it alone. I was wrong. That evening I was sitting at the kitchen table when someone started pounding on my front door. Not knocking. Pounding. I already knew who it was before I got up. I opened the door. Marissa was standing there. Her eyes were red, and she looked like she hadn't slept. For a few seconds she just stared at me. Then she said, I know about Bethany. I know about Bethany. Okay. Marissa blinked. I think she'd expected more than that. Okay? What do you want me to say? She looked past me into the apartment. Can I come in? No. That seemed to surprise her too. This used to be my home. Callum. Used to be. She stared at me for a few seconds, then rubbed her forehead. I'm not here to fight. Considering she'd nearly knocked the door off its hinges, I had some doubts. Then why are you here? I wanted to hear it from you. Hear what? She looked directly at me. Are you engaged to her? I didn't answer immediately. Not because I was hiding it. I was trying to figure out why she thought she was entitled to ask. Then Marissa looked over my shoulder. I followed her eyes. And there it was. The ring box. I'd left it on the kitchen counter because Bethany had taken the ring off earlier while helping her father with something and didn't want to lose it. She was supposed to pick it up the next morning. Marissa saw the box. Her face changed. That's not mine. No. She actually stepped toward the doorway. I moved slightly, blocking her. Is that hers? Yes. You bought her a ring? I almost laughed at the wording. No. I bought myself one. Yes, Marissa, it's hers. She stared at me. Then she asked the question again. quieter this time. You're marrying her? She said yes. Marissa just stood there. I don't know what reaction she expected from me, but apparently that wasn't it. Finally she shook her head. No. What? No. There's no way. I leaned against the doorframe. There very much is. It's been 4 months. I know how calendars work. 4 months. Callum. She kept repeating it like the number itself proved something. You were with me for 3 years. Yes. And now you're marrying Bethany after 4 months? I've known Bethany for 7 years. That's not the point. It was becoming one of Marissa's favorite sentences. She started pacing outside my door. You don't do this. Normal people don't do this. Okay. Stop saying okay. That came out loud enough that one of my neighbors opened their door down the hall. I glanced over. They immediately disappeared again. Marissa lowered her voice. You're doing this because of me. No, you're trying to hurt me. I didn't even tell you. Everyone knows. That wasn't my decision. She folded her arms. So what? You just magically fell in love with Bethany the second I was gone? I didn't answer. She gave this little laugh. There it is. There what is? I knew something was happening. Nothing was happening. Bull. Believe whatever makes this easier. That really irritated her. She started listing things again. Every time Bethany had texted me while we were together. Every coffee. Every business conversation. The birthday dinner. Bethany following me outside afterward. Apparently Bethany returning my forgotten coat was now part of a multi-year conspiracy. Did she tell you to leave me? Marissa asked. No. Did she tell you to kick me out? No. Did she tell you to cut me off? No. Did she tell you to ruin my business? I didn't ruin your business. Oh, please, you're still operating. Barely. Then adjust your prices or your costs. She stared at me like I'd insulted her. You know I built that company around the rates you gave me. Yes, exactly. I waited. For once, she seemed to hear what she'd just said. Her expression changed slightly. Then she switched subjects. I thought you'd call me. That caught me off guard. What? After everything calmed down, you kept calling me. You know what I mean? No. Actually, I didn't. She looked down. I thought eventually you'd stop being angry. I wasn't angry. You were obviously angry. I was done. She shook her head. No, you don't end 3 years overnight. You did. I rejected a proposal. You laughed at me in front of 40 people. I panicked. You said you weren't going to settle for me. I said something stupid. And I believed you. She looked at me. For the first time since she arrived, she didn't immediately have an answer. Then she said quietly, I didn't think you'd actually leave. There it was. I straightened up. What did you think would happen? I don't know. Yes. You do. She wiped at her face. I thought we'd have some space. You'd calm down. I'd calm down. We'd talk. And then? She didn't answer. And then I'd keep paying for everything? That's not fair. The apartment? Silence. The car? Callum, your business? I wasn't using you. I didn't say you were. You're implying it. I shook my head. I'm asking what you thought would happen. Her voice cracked. I thought we'd get back together eventually. That was probably the most honest thing she'd said to me in months. And weirdly, it didn't make me angry. It made everything clearer. She had believed she could say no. She had believed she could humiliate me. She had even believed she could tell 40 people that marrying me would be settling. But she hadn't believed I could leave. Marissa looked past me again toward the ring box. So she just happened to be waiting? No. She always wanted you. You don't know that. I know women. I almost smiled. Apparently not Bethany. Her eyes narrowed. What's that supposed to mean? I hesitated. There was something I hadn't told Marissa. Something Bethany and I had discussed recently. A conversation from 2 years earlier that I'd spent a long time pretending hadn't happened. Marissa noticed the hesitation immediately. What? Nothing. No. What? I sighed. You keep saying Bethany caused this. She did. She didn't. She got exactly what she wanted. I looked at Marissa. Then I finally said it. Bethany knew exactly what was going to happen. Marissa stopped. Even her expression changed. What does that mean? And that was when I realized there was no point protecting her from a conversation I should have listened to 2 years ago. 2 years ago, I said, Bethany warned me about you. Marissa's expression changed immediately. Of course she did. That reaction right there is why I never told you. What did she say? I almost didn't answer. Not because I was protecting Bethany. I just knew exactly where this conversation was going. She noticed a pattern. Marissa laughed. A pattern? Yes. What? She was analyzing our relationship from the sidelines. No, she noticed things because she knew me. Oh, that's convenient. I ignored that. The conversation with Bethany had happened after a dinner about 2 years earlier. Marissa had been complaining because I didn't want to pay for a trip she and 2 friends were planning. I wasn't even invited. That part had apparently escaped everyone. Marissa had made some comment about how I was being cheap despite earning more than her. Bethany heard it. Later, when Marissa wasn't around, Bethany asked me something. Does she ever get excited about things that don't involve you providing something? I'd been irritated immediately. What exactly is that supposed to mean? Bethany tried explaining. She said whenever I talked about Marissa, I was usually solving some problem for her. Helping with rent, helping with her business, paying for trips, fixing something, making introductions. But whenever I needed flexibility or support, Marissa suddenly had boundaries. At the time, I thought Bethany was being judgmental. Actually, I told her that. I said, you don't understand our relationship. Bethany said, maybe not. Then she said the sentence I spent the next 2 years ignoring. I think she loves what your life gives her more than she loves you. I was furious, not screaming furious, more like I went cold. I told Bethany she'd crossed a line. We barely spoke for a couple of months afterward. Standing in my doorway 2 years later, telling Marissa this, I actually felt embarrassed. Not because Bethany had warned me, because I'd defended Marissa so aggressively. Marissa stared at me. So she's been trying to break us up for 2 years. No, that's literally what you just said. No, it isn't. She told you I didn't love you. She told me what she noticed. And then suddenly you're marrying her. 2 years later. Marissa threw her hands up. Oh, come on. I was getting tired. She didn't make you reject me. She poisoned you against me. No, she obviously did. Marissa, I stopped talking to Bethany because I defended you. That finally slowed her down. What? For months, she stared at me. I told her she was wrong. I told her to stay out of our relationship. Marissa opened her mouth. Nothing came out. She didn't convince me of anything. I continued. You did. That's cruel. It's accurate. Her eyes started watering again. So now you two sit around talking about how horrible I am? No. You expect me to believe that? Bethany barely talks about you. That seemed to hurt more. I probably could have phrased it differently, but it was true. Bethany had never celebrated Marissa struggling. She never asked about the apartment. She never cared whether Marissa's business survived. When I mentioned Marissa's online post, Bethany's reaction had basically been, don't respond unless you need to. That was it. Marissa shook her head. She wanted you. Maybe. That surprised her. I shrugged. Maybe she did. Maybe she didn't. I never asked. And that doesn't bother you? Why would it? Because she was around our relationship waiting. She wasn't waiting. You don't know that. And you don't know that she was. Marissa started crying properly then. Not dramatically. She just looked exhausted. I made one mistake. I looked at her. One? You know what I mean? No. I don't. The proposal. I shook my head. The proposal wasn't the problem. Then what was? It showed me the problem. She frowned. You didn't just say no. I panicked. You laughed. I said I was sorry. You said you were sorry, but I put you under pressure. She looked away. You told 40 people marrying me would be settling. I didn't mean it like that. How else does that sentence work? She didn't answer. I continued before she could redirect things again. Bethany didn't make you say that. She didn't make you laugh. She didn't make you keep the relationship vague while talking about marriage whenever it benefited you. That's not what I did. Okay, stop doing that. Doing what? Acting like you don't care. That one landed differently. Because I had cared. A lot. That was the whole reason I'd proposed. I cared enough to ask you to marry me. Marissa looked at me. And now you don't? Not in the way you want me to. She wiped her face. What if I'd said yes? I thought about that. Honestly, that question bothered me more than anything else she'd asked. I would have married you. Her face crumpled slightly. Then how can you just turn that off? I didn't turn it off. I paused. You killed it. She looked down. Neither of us spoke for maybe 10 seconds. Then she asked quietly, is there anything I can do? No. The answer came out immediately. No hesitation. She looked back up. Nothing? No. What if I apologized to Bethany? This has nothing to do with Bethany. What if we went to counseling? No. Callum, 3 years. I know. You're really throwing it away? I'm not going back. She stood there for another few seconds. Then she looked past me toward the kitchen one last time. Poured Bethany's ring. When she spoke again, her voice was quieter. So everything we had meant nothing to you? I almost answered immediately. Then I stopped. Because for once, I wanted to make sure I said exactly what I meant. No, I said. It meant a lot. Marissa looked hopeful for half a second. I opened the door a little wider, but not to let her inside. To make it clear the conversation was ending. And that's exactly why what you did mattered. She stared at me. I knew there was one last thing she still didn't understand. And before I closed that door for good, I was going to make sure she did. You keep talking about the apartment, the car, your business, all the things that changed after we broke up, I said. But none of those things were punishment. Marissa shook her head. They sure felt like punishment. I stopped paying your bills. Exactly. They were your bills. She looked away. I stopped giving your business a discount, which you knew I depended on. Yes, because I was helping my girlfriend build her business. She crossed her arms, and apparently that help had conditions. Of course it did. Her eyes snapped back to me. I could tell she thought she'd caught me admitting something. So I explained. The condition was that we were partners. Marissa, I wasn't running a charity. I was helping the woman I thought I was going to marry. That sounds transactional. No, it sounds like a relationship. She opened her mouth, but I kept going. You were allowed to reject me. I know. You were allowed to decide you didn't want marriage. I know. You could have pulled me aside that night and said you weren't ready. I would have hated hearing it, but I would have respected it. She looked down. But you laughed. I said I was sorry. You laughed, told 40 people marrying me would be settling, and then somehow expected to come back here afterward and continue exactly where we left off. That's not what I expected. It is. You already admitted you thought I'd come back. She didn't argue with that. So what was I supposed to do? I asked. Keep paying everything while you figured out whether I was good enough? I never said you weren't good enough. I actually laughed. You literally said you weren't ready to settle for me. I was embarrassed. So was I. That stopped her. I hadn't really said that out loud before. Not to her anyway. I stood there in front of your parents, your friends, your coworkers, people I'd spent 3 years getting to know, and you made me look like some idiot who invented our entire future in my head. Marissa's eyes filled again. I didn't realize. I know. And that was really the problem. She hadn't realized. She hadn't thought about what happened after the laugh. She hadn't thought about what happened when the dinner ended. She had just assumed I would still be there. I'm not saying the last 3 years meant nothing, I said. They meant enough that I bought a ring and asked you to spend the rest of your life with me. She didn't say anything. But they don't mean I owe you the next 3. That one seemed to land. Marissa wiped her face and nodded slowly. For once, she didn't have a comeback. She looked past me toward the kitchen again. Do you love her? Yes. That answer hurt her. I could see it. But lying would have been worse. More than you loved me? I'm not comparing you. How can you not? Because this isn't a competition. She gave me a tired little laugh. Easy for you to say. You won. There was nothing to win. And I meant that. I hadn't spent 4 months trying to destroy Marissa. Her business still existed. Her money was still hers. Her belongings were hers. She'd found another place to live. As far as I knew, she was figuring things out. The only thing I had actually taken away was myself. Everything else had simply been attached to that. Marissa stood there quietly for another moment. Then she said, I really did love you. I believe you. She looked surprised. I did believe her. I just thought Bethany had been right about the rest. Marissa loved me, but she'd also gotten very comfortable with what being with me provided. Maybe she'd stopped separating the two. Maybe I had too. I wish you'd given me another chance, she said. I know. Are you happy? I thought about Bethany, about sitting at the kitchen table talking for hours, about not having to guess what she meant, about the fact that when I proposed, her first question had been whether I was sure. Yeah, Marissa nodded. Then she stepped back. Okay, that was probably the first time she'd said that word without trying to start another argument. Goodbye, Callum. Goodbye, Marissa. She walked away. I closed the door. And that was it. No dramatic final message later that night. No surprise return. For the first time in months, things simply got quiet. Bethany came over the next morning. She immediately noticed something was off. Marissa? Yeah, how bad? Actually, not that bad. I handed her the ring box. She opened it. You left this here. I know. She slipped the ring back onto her finger. Then she looked at me. You okay? Yeah. And weirdly, I was. A few months have passed since then. Bethany and I are planning the wedding now. Small one. Neither of us has any interest in performing our relationship for a room full of people. I lost contact with several mutual friends. A couple eventually apologized for how they acted at Marissa's birthday. The person who snickered never admitted it. Still don't know who it was. At this point, I don't care. From what I've heard, Marissa is still running her store. She had to change some things after losing the discounted rates, but that's her business, literally and figuratively. I don't wish her failure. I also don't feel responsible for preventing it. That distinction took me longer to learn than it should have. Sometimes people ask whether I regret proposing that night. I don't. If Marissa had said yes, I would have married her. That's the uncomfortable truth. So in a strange way, that humiliating dinner saved both of us from making a much bigger mistake. She thought rejecting the ring meant rejecting one moment. She thought I'd cool down, come back, and everything surrounding our relationship would remain available while she decided what she wanted. It didn't, and that's probably the biggest thing I learned from all of this. When somebody tells you they don't want the future you're offering them, believe them. Don't threaten them. Don't chase them. Don't destroy their life. Just stop building it for them. Marissa thought I would always be there because, for 3 years, I always had been. By the time she realized that wasn't guaranteed, I had already closed the door. And this time, neither of us tried to open it again. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you really like our videos, please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Have a great day.